The void of space stretched endless and cold between the stars, and in that darkness, the Valkorian Grand Fleet moved like a swarm of silver locusts. Admiral Zyxeth stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical display with all four of his amber eyes. The human colony world of New Haven hung before them, a small blue marble that would soon belong to the Valkorian Empire. "Status report," Zyxeth demanded, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. "All 700 vessels in formation, Admiral," his second-in-command, Krathel, reported. "The human defense force consists of only 12 ships. They have positioned themselves in a standard defensive line between us and the planet." Zyxeth made a sound that was both amusement and contempt. The humans were a young species, barely a century into their space age. They had spread quickly across a small cluster of stars, building colonies and establishing trade routes. But they had never faced a true galactic power. They had never faced the Valkorians. "Open a channel to their commander," Zyxeth ordered. The holographic display flickered and a human face appeared. The creature was female, Zyxeth noted, with dark skin and short-cropped hair that was gray at the temples. Her eyes were brown and steady, meeting his gaze without fear. This surprised him slightly. "I am Admiral Zyxeth of the Valkorian Grand Fleet," he announced. "You are hopelessly outnumbered. Surrender your world and your people will be treated according to our laws. Resist, and we will destroy your ships and take your world anyway. You have one of your human hours to decide." The human commander tilted her head slightly. "I am Commander Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force. Thank you for the offer, Admiral. We will need to discuss it." The channel closed. Zyxeth turned to his tactical officer. "Analyze their ships. I want to know everything about their capabilities." The next hour passed slowly. Zyxeth used the time to review what the Empire knew about humans. They were a curious species, prone to violence among themselves, but also capable of surprising cooperation. Their technology was primitive compared to the Valkorians, their ships slower and less powerful. Their weapons were adequate but not impressive. They had no experience in large-scale space combat. This would be a simple conquest. When the hour ended, Zyxeth opened the channel again. Commander Vasquez's face appeared and she was smiling slightly. This confused him. "We have decided not to surrender," she said simply. "That is unfortunate for your people," Zyxeth replied. "Your 12 ships cannot hope to defeat 700. This is basic mathematics." "Perhaps," Vasquez said, "but we humans have never been very good at math." The channel closed again. Zyxeth felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, not concern exactly, but something close to curiosity. Most species, when faced with overwhelming force, either surrendered or attacked in a desperate charge. The humans were doing neither. They simply sat there, their 12 small ships holding position. "Begin the attack," Zyxeth ordered. "Standard formation, crush them and proceed to the planet." The Valkorian fleet moved forward like a great metal wave. The tactical display showed the distances closing, the human ships remaining motionless. It was strange behavior, Zyxeth thought. Were they frozen with fear? Were their systems malfunctioning? When the fleet reached optimal firing range, something unexpected happened. The 12 human ships suddenly broke apart. Not exploded, but literally broke apart into smaller pieces. Each ship split into 4 sections, and each section seemed to have its own engines and weapons. Where there had been 12 ships, there were now 48 smaller vessels. "Interesting," Zyxeth murmured, "but still not enough. Continue the attack." The Valkorian fleet opened fire. Thousands of energy beams lanced through space toward the human vessels. But the smaller ships were fast, faster than anything Zyxeth had seen. They darted and weaved through the barrage, taking some hits but avoiding many more. And then they did something that made no sense at all. Instead of firing back, the human ships accelerated directly toward the Valkorian fleet. They flew between the larger vessels, ducking under weapons arrays and skimming close to hull surfaces. They were so close that the Valkorian ships could not fire without risking hitting each other. "They are mad," Krathel said. "What do they hope to accomplish?" Zyxeth did not answer. He was watching the tactical display with growing unease. The human ships were not attacking. They were deploying something, small objects that attached to Valkorian hulls before the little vessels zipped away. "What are those things?" Zyxeth demanded. "Bombs, analyze them immediately." Before the analysis could complete, the objects activated. They were not bombs. They were jammers. Hundreds of them, attached to ships throughout the fleet, began broadcasting powerful interference signals. Communications became garbled. Targeting systems flickered and failed. Ships that had spent centuries learning to fight as one coordinated unit suddenly found themselves isolated and confused. "Switch to secondary frequencies," Zyxeth ordered, but his voice came out distorted even on the bridge speakers. The human ships regrouped and began their actual attack. They struck at specific targets, not trying to destroy ships but disabling them. Engines were hit, leaving vessels drifting. Weapons arrays were targeted and destroyed. Command towers were struck with precision that spoke of careful planning. And through it all, Commander Vasquez's voice occasionally broke through the jamming, giving orders in a calm, steady tone. "Blue team, hit their communications relays. Red team, focus on the carriers. Yellow team, keep moving. Don't give them time to adapt." Zyxeth watched in disbelief as his fleet fell into chaos. Ships that tried to pursue the human vessels found themselves firing on their own allies. Commanders who tried to coordinate found their messages scrambled. The beautiful formation that had intimidated 100 worlds was dissolving into confusion. "This is impossible," Krathel said. "They are only 48 ships. We are 700. "Numbers mean nothing if you cannot use them," Zyxeth replied quietly. He was beginning to understand. The humans had not come to fight 700 ships. They had come to make 700 ships fight themselves. But Zyxeth had not conquered 100 worlds by being slow to adapt. He began issuing new orders, using light signals and messenger drones when communications failed. He ordered his ships to spread out, to give the humans fewer places to hide. He called for his fastest vessels to pursue and destroy the smaller human craft. The battle was not over, it had only begun. And somewhere in the chaos, Commander Elena Vasquez smiled. The space around New Haven had become a maze of fire and steel. Commander Vasquez stood at the tactical display in her ship, the Defiant Hope, watching the chaos unfold. Her gambit had worked better than expected, but she knew it was not enough. The Valkorians were adapting, spreading out their fleet to limit the effectiveness of the jamming devices. "Commander, they are changing formation," her tactical officer, Lieutenant Chen, reported. "They are giving each ship more space. Our close-quarter tactics will be less effective." "I expected that," Vasquez said. "Move to Phase 2. The 48 human craft began to pull back, regrouping at a position near the largest moon of New Haven. From the Valkorian perspective, it looked like a retreat. Admiral Zyxeth, watching from the Eternal Dominion, felt a moment of satisfaction. "They are running," Krathel observed. "Should we pursue?" "Carefully," Zyxeth replied. "These humans are full of tricks. Maintain formation and advance slowly. We will crush them against that moon." But Vasquez was not retreating. She was repositioning. The moon, called Haven's Shadow by the colonists, had been mined for decades. Its surface was covered with tunnels and installations. More importantly, it had been prepared for exactly this moment. "All ships disperse and take shelter positions," Vasquez ordered. "Moon batteries prepare to fire on my mark." The human ships scattered, diving toward the moon's surface and disappearing into craters and canyons. The Valkorian fleet followed, their sensors tracking the fleeing vessels. They did not notice the hidden weapon platforms until it was too late. "Fire," Vasquez said. The moon's surface came alive with light. Hundreds of concealed batteries opened fire simultaneously, sending a wall of destruction into the advancing Valkorian fleet. The weapons were not particularly powerful individually, but there were many of them, and they were all firing at once. The front ranks of the Valkorian fleet took heavy damage. Dozens of ships were destroyed outright. Many more were crippled, their shields overwhelmed by the concentrated barrage. The neat formation dissolved as captains tried to evade the unexpected attack. "What treachery is this?" Zyketh demanded. "They armed the moon." "It appears so, Admiral," Krathel replied, his voice strained. "We have lost 63 vessels. Another 100 are reporting significant damage." Zyketh felt something he had not felt in centuries. He felt doubt. These humans were not fighting like any species he had encountered. They were not trying to match strength with strength. They were using everything, the environment, preparation, deception, to multiply their effectiveness. "Pull back beyond the moon's range," Zyketh ordered. "We need to reassess." The Valkorian fleet withdrew, leaving behind a debris field of destroyed ships. Vasquez watched them go, allowing herself a moment of relief. But she knew this was only round 2. The Valkorians still had over 500 functional ships. Her moon batteries had expended most of their ammunition, and her own ships, though nimble, could not survive a sustained engagement. "Commander," Lieutenant Chen said, "message from New Haven. The evacuation is 30% complete. They need more time." Vasquez nodded grimly. That was the real mission. Not to defeat the Valkorian fleet, an impossible task, but to delay them long enough for the civilian transports to escape. 2 million people lived on New Haven. Every minute she could buy meant more ships reaching safety. "Then we give them more time," she said. Admiral Zyketh was having a conference with his senior commanders via secured visual link. The faces of a dozen Valkorians looked back at him, their expressions ranging from angry to confused. "They cannot have many more surprises," one commander argued. "We should attack in full force and overwhelm them." "That is what they want us to think," another countered. "Every time we attack directly, they spring some new trap." Zyketh listened to the debate, his mind working through the problem. The humans had shown themselves to be clever, yes, but cleverness had limits. They had used deception and surprise, but those tools became less effective when the enemy expected them. "Here is what we will do," he said, silencing the others. "We will not attack the moon. We will bypass it entirely. One group will hold position here, keeping the human ships pinned. The rest will circle around and approach New Haven from the other side. Even if they have more hidden weapons, they cannot have prepared every approach." It was a sound strategy. The Valkorian fleet split into 2 groups. 300 ships remained near Haven's shadow, weapons aimed at the moon's surface. The remaining 300 began a wide arc around the planet, heading for the far side where the human defenses were surely weaker. Vasquez watched this development with concern. "They are splitting up. That is actually smart." "What do we do?" Chen asked. "We adapt," Vasquez replied. "Signal the colony. Tell them the eastern continent will be vulnerable in 4 hours. Expedite all evacuations from that region." She looked at the tactical display, calculating options. The moon batteries were mostly empty. Her ships were low on fuel and ammunition. The enemy had learned from her initial tactics and would not fall for them again. She needed something new, something unexpected. An idea began to form in her mind. It was risky, perhaps even reckless, but reckless was better than defeat. "Lieutenant Chen, how much fuel do our ships have remaining?" "Enough for approximately 6 more hours of full combat operations, Commander." "And if we routed power from weapons and life support?" Chen's eyes widened. "Commander, that would leave us defenseless." "Not defenseless," Vasquez said. "Just differently armed. Get me all ship captains on secure channel. I have a plan and they are going to hate it." While the humans plotted, the Valkorian flanking force continued its arc around New Haven. Commander Drexel led this group, an experienced officer who had conquered 12 worlds personally. He was not as cautious as Zyxeth. He believed in decisive action. "Increase speed," he ordered. "The sooner we reach the planet's far side, the sooner this campaign ends." His fleet accelerated, eager to prove themselves after the embarrassment of the moon attack. They did not know that Vasquez had anticipated exactly this response. She had studied Valkorian battle records for years. She knew that their commanders, when frustrated, tended to push harder. It was a pattern born of centuries of easy victories. And patterns could be exploited. The human ships launched from the moon's surface, not toward the holding force but away from it. They seemed to be fleeing toward New Haven itself. The Valkorians did not pursue immediately, uncertain if this was another trick. "Where are they going?" Krathel asked. "It does not matter," Zyxeth replied. "They are abandoning their defensive position. Signal Drexel, tell him the path is clear." But the human ships were not fleeing. They were repositioning for Phase 3 of Vasquez's plan, a phase that would require every bit of courage her crews possessed. They were about to teach the galaxy a lesson about humanity. The 48 human vessels raced through space toward New Haven, but they were not heading for the planet itself. Commander Vasquez had positioned them in a precise formation, their courses calculated down to the meter. Behind them, the debris from destroyed Valkorian ships tumbled silently through the void. "All ships confirm readiness for Maneuver Omega," Vasquez ordered. One by one, her captains reported in. Their voices were steady despite the fear that must have gripped them. They were about to attempt something that had never been done in actual combat. Commander Drexel's flanking force was completing its arc around New Haven. 300 ships swept toward the planet's far side, weapons hot and shields at maximum. They expected resistance, possibly another moon with hidden weapons, perhaps a small defensive fleet. What they did not expect was nothing. "Sensors show no human presence in this sector," Drexel's tactical officer reported. "The approach is clear." "Proceed to orbit," Drexel ordered. "Begin landing preparations." The Valkorian ships descended toward New Haven's atmosphere. The planet's eastern continent lay below them, vast and green, dotted with the lights of human settlements. Drexel allowed himself to feel satisfaction. Despite the tricks and traps, the conquest would succeed. Then his sensors screamed a warning. The human ships burst from the planet's atmosphere below them, engines burning at full power. They had hidden themselves in New Haven's upper atmosphere, riding the edge of the planet's gravity well while the Valkorians circled around. It was a dangerous maneuver that risked destruction from atmospheric friction, but they had survived. And now they were attacking from below, where the Valkorians least expected. "Evasive action," Drexel shouted, but his ships were in descent mode, configured for planetary assault rather than space combat. By the time they reconfigured, the humans were among them. Vasquez's ships did not fire conventional weapons. Instead, they launched grappling tethers, magnetic cables that attached to Valkorian hulls. Before the aliens could understand what was happening, the human vessels fired their engines again, not to accelerate forward but to drag. The tethered Valkorian ships suddenly found themselves pulled off course. Their descent paths became erratic. Ships collided with each other as their formations dissolved. Some were dragged so far off course that they entered unstable orbits, falling toward the planet. "Cut those cables," Drexel commanded. "Fire on the human ships." But cutting the cables was not easy. The humans had attached them to multiple points on each ship, and the tethers were made of reinforced materials designed to resist energy weapons. The Valkorian crews found themselves in a tug-of-war they were not equipped to win. Meanwhile, Vasquez was executing the next part of her plan. "All ships, release tethers on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark." The cables detached simultaneously. The Valkorian ships, having been pulling against the tethers, suddenly lurched in the opposite direction. Many lost attitude control. Several more collisions occurred. The neat planetary assault had become chaos. "Now fire," Vasquez ordered. The human ships unleashed their remaining weapons, targeting engines and navigation systems. They were not trying to destroy the Valkorian vessels, but to cripple them. A ship without engines was not a threat. A ship without navigation could not fight effectively. Drexel watched in horror as his command fell apart. Of his 300 ships, over 50 were now drifting without power. Another 30 had crashed into the planet's atmosphere and burned up. The rest were scattered across orbits that would take hours to correct. "Admiral Zyxeth," he transmitted desperately, "we require immediate assistance. The humans have ambushed our assault force." Zyxeth received the message on the other side of the planet. His remaining 300 ships had been holding position near Haven's shadow, watching the empty moon warily. Now he ordered them to advance, circling the planet to support Drexel. But Commander Vasquez had planned for this too. As Zyxeth's fleet moved, the moon's remaining weapons opened fire. Not at the ships, which were too far away, but at something else. The shots struck the debris field from the earlier battle, sending chunks of destroyed Valkorian ships spinning outward like missiles. "They are using our own wreckage against us," Krathel observed. The debris spread out in an expanding cloud directly in the fleet's path. Zyxeth had a choice. He could slow down and navigate around the debris, losing precious time, or he could push through, risking damage from the tumbling metal. "Maintain speed," Zyxeth decided. "Our shields can handle debris." He was partially right. Most of his ships pushed through the debris field with minimal damage, but some were not so lucky. Shields failed, hulls were punctured, and 16 more ships joined the growing list of casualties. By the time Zyxeth reached Drexel's position, the human ships had vanished again. They were fast, these human vessels, and they knew how to use cover. They had disappeared into the planet's radiation belt, where sensors had difficulty tracking them. "How many ships do we have left?" Zyxeth asked quietly. Krathel consulted his display. "Approximately 500 still combat-capable, Admiral. Another 100 are damaged but repairable. We have lost nearly 100 vessels." 100 ships, destroyed by a force of 12, now 48 tiny human craft. It was humiliating, it was impossible, and yet it had happened. "The humans are delaying us," Zyxeth realized. "They are buying time for their colony to evacuate." "Should we proceed directly to the planet and ignore the human ships?" Krathel suggested. "That is exactly what they want us to do," Zyxeth replied. "They will attack us from behind while we are focused on the planet. No, we must deal with their fleet first." But dealing with the human fleet was proving impossible. Every time the Valkorians advanced, the humans struck from an unexpected direction. Every time the Valkorians prepared for one tactic, the humans used another. They seemed to have an endless supply of tricks. Down on New Haven, the evacuation continued. Transports lifted off carrying thousands of civilians, heading for the outer system where hidden jump points would take them to safety. Commander Vasquez watched their progress on her tactical display, counting each ship that escaped. 40% complete now, 50%. Every minute was more lives saved. "Commander," Lieutenant Chen said, "the Valkorian fleet is regrouping. They are forming into a single mass." Vasquez studied the display. Zyxeth had learned. He was pulling all his ships together, creating a formation so dense that the humans could not approach without facing overwhelming firepower. It was a defensive posture, but it was also a preparation for a final assault. "He is going to try to end this with one massive strike," Vasquez said. "Smart." "What do we do?" Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. They had used most of their tricks. The jammers were depleted. The moon batteries were empty. Their ammunition was low. They had bought hours, precious hours, but they could not buy many more. Unless they did something truly crazy. "Lieutenant Chen," she said slowly, "how much do you know about the Herschel maneuver?" Chen went pale. "Commander, that is a theoretical concept. It has never been tested in combat. The risks are enormous." "So are the stakes," Vasquez replied. "Begin calculations. If we are going to make them retreat, we need to show them something they have never seen before." Admiral Zaixeth waited impatiently as his fleet consolidated its formation. He had spent his career studying alien tactics, learning the patterns of warfare across a dozen civilizations. But these humans fought like no one he had encountered. They were unpredictable, creative, and utterly without fear. He almost respected them. Almost. "Formation complete," Krathel reported. 500 ships in attack configuration. No enemy vessels detected within engagement range. "Then begin the assault," Zaixeth ordered. "All ships advance on New Haven. Destroy anything that approaches. Show no mercy." The Valkorian fleet moved as one, a wall of silver death heading for the blue planet. This time there would be no tricks. This time overwhelming force would prevail. Or so Zaixeth believed. Commander Vasquez watched the Valkorian fleet advance. 500 ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons systems creating a wall of detection and firepower that would vaporize anything that approached. It was a beautiful sight in its way, beautiful and deadly. "Evacuation status?" she asked. 68% complete, Lieutenant Chen reported. "Approximately 600,000 civilians remain on the surface." 600,000 lives. That was the number Vasquez carried on her shoulders. Every minute she could delay the fleet was more people reaching safety. But minutes were running out. "All ships," she transmitted to her small fleet, "form up for the Herschel maneuver. This is going to be rough. Anyone who wants to opt out, now is the time." Silence from her captains. Then one by one confirmations came in. Every ship was ready. The Herschel maneuver was named after Dr. Helena Herschel, a physicist who had theorized about using gravitational slingshots in combat. The concept was simple in principle but terrifying in execution. Ships would use a planet's gravity to accelerate to incredible speeds, faster than conventional engines could achieve. At those speeds, even a small ship became a missile. But the risks were enormous. Miscalculate by a fraction, and you would crash into the planet. Fail to time your exit properly, and you would shoot off into deep space. The forces involved would push ships and crews to their limits. Vasquez's 48 ships dove toward New Haven. The Valkorians, seeing this, assumed it was another retreat. They continued their advance, confident that the humans were finally breaking. They were wrong. The human ships skimmed New Haven's atmosphere, using the planet's gravity to accelerate. Faster and faster they went, their engines adding to the gravitational boost. Warning lights flashed on every bridge as hulls heated from atmospheric friction. Crews strapped in tight, fighting against G-forces that threatened to crush them. Vasquez felt her vision narrowing as blood fled her brain. She gritted her teeth and focused on the tactical display, watching their trajectory curve around the planet. They were going faster than any ship was designed to go, faster than the Valkorians believed possible. "Engines to maximum," she ordered, her voice strained. "Prepare for exit on my mark." The ships whipped around New Haven like stones from a sling. They emerged from behind the planet at tremendous velocity, heading directly at the Valkorian formation. But they were not going to hit the formation exactly. They were going to pass through it. Admiral Zaixeth saw the humans coming. His sensors registered their speed with disbelief. "That is impossible," he said. "No ship can survive that velocity." "They are not trying to survive," Krathel realized. "They are trying to destroy us." "All ships maximum evasive," Zaixeth commanded. But the Valkorian fleet was in tight formation. Ships could not evade without colliding with each other. They were packed so closely that evasive maneuvers were nearly impossible. The human ships tore through the formation like bullets through paper. At their speed, they could not stop. They could barely steer, but they did not need to do either. Each ship was trailing a cloud of debris, small objects released just before they entered the formation. Metal fragments, old missile casings, anything that could be found on the ships. At the speed the humans were traveling, even a scrap of metal hit like a bomb. The debris shredded shields and hulls. Ships that thought they were safe behind their neighbors were struck by ricocheting fragments. The neat formation dissolved into chaos as captains tried desperately to avoid the storm of destruction. And then the human ships were through, shooting out the other side of the formation and continuing into empty space. Their engines fired again, killing their momentum, but they would need time to decelerate and return. Behind them, the Valkorian fleet was in ruins. Zyxeth stared at his tactical display. Over 100 ships were destroyed or crippled. Another 50 were reporting severe damage. His 500 had become barely 300 in seconds. "What just happened?" he asked, his voice hollow. No one answered. No one knew how to describe what they had witnessed. On her ship, now drifting in the void beyond the battle, Vasquez allowed herself to breathe. The maneuver had worked. They had survived barely. Several of her ships reported serious damage. Crews were injured, but they were alive. "Evacuation status," she managed. 82%, Chen replied, his voice shaky. "They need another hour at least." An hour. Vasquez looked at her battered fleet. They had thrown everything at the Valkorians. The jammers were gone. The moon was empty. The Herschel maneuver could not be repeated. Their ships were too damaged and the Valkorians would be spread out now. What else could they do? Admiral Zyxeth wrestled with his emotions. Fear, which he had not felt in decades, warred with pride. He had lost nearly half his fleet to a handful of human ships. The shame would follow him for the rest of his life. But he could still win. He still had 300 ships. The humans had exhausted their tricks. All he had to do was press the attack. "Regroup," he ordered. "Spread formation. We advance on the planet and complete the conquest." "Admiral," Krathel said hesitantly, "perhaps we should reconsider. These humans have shown themselves capable of extraordinary tactics. Who knows what else they have planned?" "They have nothing left," Zyxeth replied. "Look at their ships, drifting, damaged, far from the battle. They gambled everything on that attack and now they are spent." He was right. Vasquez knew he was right. She had used every weapon, every trick, every advantage she had. The Valkorians were wounded, but they were still a force of 300 warships. Her 48 battered vessels could not stop them. Unless she could make them think they could. "Lieutenant Chen," she said slowly, "how good are you at bluffing?" Chen blinked. "Commander." "We cannot win this battle," Vasquez said. "But maybe we do not have to. Maybe we just have to make them believe we can." She pulled up her communication system and opened a channel to the Valkorian flagship. Admiral Zyxeth's face appeared. All four eyes narrowed with anger and suspicion. "Commander Vasquez," he said coldly, "have you called to surrender?" "No," Vasquez replied. "I have called to offer you one last chance to retreat." Zyxeth made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You are in no position to demand anything. Your fleet is broken. Your planet is defenseless. This battle is over." "Is it?" Vasquez asked. She let a small smile cross her face. "Admiral, you have seen only a fraction of what we are capable of. The jammers, the moon batteries, the Herschel maneuver, these were just the first act. Would you like to see what we have planned for the second?" Zyxeth hesitated. He did not believe her. He could not believe her. And yet everything the humans had done was supposedly impossible. They had turned his 700 ships into 300. What else might they do? "You are bluffing," he said. "Am I?" Vasquez replied. You believed we could not harm you when this battle began. How did that work out? Zyxeth stared at her, trying to read her expression. She looked calm, confident, almost eager. It was the face of someone who held cards they had not yet played. But was it real or an act? The Admiral had conquered 100 worlds. He had fought a dozen species. He had never retreated, never shown fear, never failed to achieve victory. But he had also never faced humans before. "Commander," Zyxeth said carefully, "what exactly are you proposing?" "I am proposing that you leave," Vasquez said. "Take your remaining ships and go. Tell your empire that Earth is not worth the cost. Because if you stay, if you continue this attack, I promise you that more of your ships will burn. How many can you afford to lose before your empire starts asking questions about your leadership?" It was a gamble. Vasquez had nothing left. Her ships were running on fumes, but Zyxeth did not know that. All he knew was that every assumption he had made about humans had been wrong. The silence stretched between them. Admiral Zyxeth stood on his command deck, staring at the holographic image of Commander Vasquez. Her face was calm, almost serene. She showed no fear, no desperation. Either she was the greatest bluffer in the galaxy, or she truly had more weapons to deploy. Around him, his officers waited in tense silence. The tactical display showed 300 Valkorian ships, damaged but functional. Against them stood 48 human vessels, battered and far from optimal combat positions. By any logical measure, the Valkorians should attack. They should crush the remaining resistance and claim their prize. But logic had failed today. "You expect me to believe you have more surprises," Zyxeth said slowly, "after everything you have already used." "What I expect," Vasquez replied, "is for you to understand that humans do not think the way other species think. We do not accept situations as they are. We change them. Every time you believed you had us cornered, we found a way out. Why would now be any different? Because you are clearly at the end of your resources. Your ships are damaged. Your weapons are depleted. And yet here I am, offering you the chance to leave." Vasquez leaned forward slightly. "Admiral, I have studied your species. The Valkorians are conquerors. You expand across the stars, absorbing world after world. But you succeed because you choose your battles carefully. You overwhelm weaker enemies with superior numbers. You do not take risks." "This is not a risk," Zyxeth insisted. "This is simple mathematics." "Is it? Let me ask you this. How will your empire react when they learn you lost 400 ships conquering one human colony? A colony that had 12 ships defending it. 12 ships, Admiral. Even if you win today, even if you take New Haven, the story of this battle will spread. Every species you have conquered will hear about it. They will learn that humans defeated impossible odds. They will start to wonder if they could do the same." Zyxeth felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. She was right about one thing. The political implications of this disaster would haunt him regardless of the outcome. The Valkorian Empire ruled through fear. If that fear was diminished, rebellions might follow. "And if I leave," he said, "what story spreads then? That the Valkorians fled from a handful of humans." "The story," Vasquez said, "is whatever you want it to be. You came to conquer. You encountered unexpected resistance. You made a tactical withdrawal to reassess. It happens. No shame in recognizing when a battle is more costly than the prize." Krathel leaned close to Zyxeth. "Admiral, the human evacuation transports are still departing. Every minute we spend talking, more of their population escapes." Zyxeth knew this. He also knew that the longer this conversation continued, the more his confidence eroded. Vasquez was playing him, manipulating his uncertainty. He should end this now, order the attack, accept whatever losses came. But he could not shake the feeling that she was waiting for exactly that. "You are remarkably calm for someone facing annihilation," he observed. "I have been facing annihilation for hours," Vasquez replied. "At a certain point, you stop worrying about it and just focus on the task at hand. My task is to protect my people. I will do whatever it takes to accomplish that. Will you? Will I what? Will you do whatever it takes to accomplish your task? Because your task was supposed to be easy conquest. How is that working out? Zyxeth was silent. On New Haven, the evacuation continued. 91% complete now. Transport ships lifted off from spaceports across the planet, carrying families and individuals who had left everything behind. They did not know the details of the battle above them. They only knew that Commander Vasquez had bought them time. In her damaged ship, Vasquez watched the conversation unfold on her display. She had played every card she had. Now she could only wait and hope. "Admiral," she said finally, "I am going to give you something we humans call a gift. Not because I expect anything in return, but because I want you to understand us." She gestured to Lieutenant Chen, who transmitted a data packet to the Valkorian flagship. Zyxeth's officers analyzed the transmission quickly. "It appears to be technical specifications," one reported. "Details of the jamming devices, the tethering system, the trajectory calculations for their high-speed maneuver." "Why would you give me this?" Zyxeth asked, confused. "Because it does not matter," Vasquez said. "Those were not our great weapons. Our great weapon is something you cannot copy. It is the way we think, the way we refuse to accept defeat, the way we find solutions where others see only problems." She paused, letting her words sink in. "If you attack us now, you might win. You probably will win. But next time we will have new tactics, new weapons, new tricks you have never imagined. And there will be a next time, Admiral. Humans do not give up. We never give up. You can conquer New Haven today and spend the next century fighting us. Or you can leave now and tell your empire that humans are not worth the trouble." Zyxeth stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He laughed. It was not a pleasant sound, but it was genuine. "Commander Vasquez," he said, "you are either the most brilliant tactician I have ever encountered or the most fortunate fool in the galaxy. I cannot tell which." "Perhaps both," she admitted. "Perhaps." Zyxeth turned to face his crew. He looked at Krathel, at the officers who had served him for decades. They were loyal. They would attack if he ordered it. But they were also watching him, wondering what he would decide. "Signal the fleet," he said finally. "We are withdrawing." The bridge erupted in confused voices. "Admiral, are you certain? We can still win this battle." "Yes, we probably can," Zyxeth agreed. "But Commander Vasquez is right about one thing. The cost of this victory would be too high, not just in ships but in reputation. The story of this battle will spread regardless. Better it ends with us making a tactical choice rather than being bled further by human tricks." He turned back to the display where Vasquez's face still waited. "You have won today, Commander, but understand this. The Valkorian Empire has a long memory. We will meet again." "I look forward to it," Vasquez replied, and something in her voice suggested she meant it. The communication ended. Zyxeth watched as his fleet began forming up for departure. 300 ships down from 700. A disaster by any measure. And yet, looking at the blue planet below, at the stream of transport ships still escaping, he felt something unexpected. Respect. These humans were dangerous, not because of their weapons or their numbers, but because of their minds. They thought differently, acted differently, refused to accept limitations that other species took for granted. In a galaxy full of species that had learned to accept their place, humans were chaos incarnate. "Admiral," Krathel said quietly, "the High Command will want an explanation." "And they will receive one," Zyxeth replied. "I will tell them the truth, that we encountered a species unlike any other, that conventional tactics are useless against them, that conquering their worlds is possible but would cost more than it gains. They may not accept that. Then they can come try themselves." Zyxeth settled into his command chair as his flagship turned away from New Haven. Let them learn what we learned today. Let them see what humans are capable of when pushed to the limit. Behind him, the last evacuation transports cleared the planet's atmosphere. 100% of the civilian population had escaped. New Haven itself was lost, its cities empty, its resources abandoned. But its people were free. Commander Vasquez watched the Valkorian fleet jump to faster-than-light drive, disappearing into the void between stars. Her bridge crew slumped in their seats, exhausted beyond words. They had fought for 12 hours straight. They had performed maneuvers that should have killed them. They had bluffed an empire into retreat. "Commander," Lieutenant Chen said weakly, "did we just win?" Vasquez considered the question. New Haven was gone. 2 million people had become refugees. The Valkorians would return eventually, with better tactics and more ships. But today, everyone was alive. Today, the impossible had become possible. "Yes, Lieutenant," she said, "we won." The story of the Battle of New Haven spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had trembled before the Valkorian Empire heard about the 12 human ships that had stopped 700. They heard about the tricks and tactics, the creativity and courage. They heard that humans did not know when to quit. And somewhere, in the dark spaces between stars, other empires began to reconsider their plans for expansion toward human space. The Terran Defense Force established a new doctrine based on Vasquez's methods. They called it adaptive warfare, fighting that changed constantly, that refused to follow predictable patterns, that treated every disadvantage as an opportunity waiting to be discovered. Commander Vasquez became Admiral Vasquez, tasked with training the next generation of officers. She taught them that battles were not won by firepower alone. They were won by minds willing to see what others missed, by hearts that refused to accept defeat, by spirits that found hope in the darkest moments. The Valkorians eventually returned, as everyone knew they would. They came with new ships, new tactics, new commanders who had studied Vasquez's methods. They lost again, and again, and again. Because in the end, the greatest weapon humans possessed was not any device or ship or strategy. It was something simpler and more powerful. It was the absolute, unshakable belief that there was always a way to win. The galaxy learned this lesson slowly, one battle at a time, but they learned it well. Humanity had arrived among the stars, and everything was about to change.